If you had to face a night at 60 degrees Fahrenheit, armed with nothing but bone tools, whale ribs, and a home half buried in frozen earth, would you make it until morning, or would the Arctic claim you before sunrise? Because in this world, darkness is not just the absence of light. It is a force that tests every breath, every heartbeat, and every decision you make. Out here, survival isn't luck. It's knowledge carved into ice, carried through generations, and earned the hard way. So ask yourself once more, could you last a single night in the land that has defeated almost everyone, except the Inuit? The Arctic does not forgive mistakes. It is a world where darkness can swallow months at a time, where winds roar harder than hurricanes, and where the sea freezes into plates of armor that stretch beyond sight. Yet for thousands of years, Inuit families not only survived here, they thrived. Not by conquering nature, but by learning to read it, anticipate it, and move with forces powerful enough to crush any outsider. Long before Europeans traced the edges of polar maps, Inuit communities had already mastered a landscape most would call uninhabitable. They traveled with the seasons, lived with intention, and understood that survival in this place was never a test of brute strength, but an art of harmony. To outsiders, the Arctic looks empty, a blank expanse of snow and silence. But Inuit see a world crowded with signals. Snow that whispers its age, ice that sings when it's thinning, a sky whose shifting colors hint at storms still hours away. Every color matters. Every sound matters. Every smell matters. Life depends on noticing the smallest changes before they become dangers. And just beyond the horizon lies something deeper. A quiet mystery that shaped their homes, their hunting routes, their way of traveling, and ultimately, their entire worldview. It is this mystery, the one woven into the land itself, that reveals why Inuit engineering remains one of humanity's most brilliant adaptations. Most people picture an igloo when they imagine Inuit life. But the true winter fortress, the structure that carried families through the deadliest, darkest months, was the qarmaq, a semi-subterranean home built directly into the frozen ground. Imagine stepping into a shelter whose walls rise from carved earth and packed snow, reinforced with whale ribs, driftwood, moss, and thick layers of sod. The entrance slopes downward, a cold air trap designed with quiet genius, while warm air rises naturally toward the raised sleeping platforms. This wasn't just a house. It was physics shaped by generations who studied every breath of the Arctic. A single stone lamp burning seal fat could heat the space to life-saving temperatures even as blizzards screamed outside. Caribou hides softened the cold ground. Snow blocks and sod formed a roof so dense and insulated that the outside world fell away, leaving a silence so deep it felt almost spiritual. A silence where the heart could hear its own rhythm. Even the placement of a qarmaq was deliberate. Never where drifting snow might bury the entrance. Never where thin ice beneath the earth hummed a warning. Everything had reason. Everything had memory. Inside these warm, ancient rooms, children absorbed stories of survival. Hunters traced routes across sea ice. Elders listened to the wind and interpreted what tomorrow might bring. And in this glow of heat and community, Inuit engineers discovered something extraordinary. An architectural wisdom so efficient, so perfectly adapted to the cold, that modern scientists are only now beginning to understand its brilliance. Inuit life followed a precise rhythm shaped by the seasons, the tides, and the quiet migrations of animals across ice and tundra. Each morning began with essential tasks: feeding the dogs that pulled sleds, sharpening tools dulled by yesterday's cold, clearing snow from roof vents, or testing the shoreline ice for new fractures that could spell danger. Inside the home, women prepared food with practiced efficiency, dried skins for storage, softened hides for clothing, and crafted parkas whose warmth could outmatch even the most advanced modern jackets. Children were never passive onlookers. They learned by doing, by watching hands that knew more than words could teach. Even toddlers held small driftwood harpoons, their tiny fingers mimicking the movements they would one day rely on for survival. When the sun finally returned after months of winter darkness, families stepped out of their qarmaq homes and followed the cracks of sea ice in search of seal and fish. Summer brought freedom. Skin boats slicing across open water, temporary camps rising and falling with the needs of the season, berries gathered in small baskets, fish hung to dry on wooden racks, and endless days preparing for a winter that always lingered too close behind. But beneath these daily tasks lived a quieter skill, a subtle intuition every Inuit child absorbed through repetition, a way of sensing the snow, of reading the ice, of interpreting shadows, winds, and faint sounds. It was a talent woven into every action, whether shaping tools or walking across frozen ground, a talent outsiders rarely noticed, yet one that often determined whether a family would endure another year, in a land where precision meant life. A knife was never just a knife. A harpoon was never simply a weapon. Inuit tools were masterpieces of adaptation, design refined through centuries of trial, error, and a relationship with the land so intimate that every piece of bone, wood, or stone carried the wisdom of those who shaped it. Harpoons were crafted with detachable heads, so a wounded seal couldn't slip away beneath the ice. Ulu knives, curved like a crescent moon, were perfect for slicing hides, preparing meat, trimming sinew, or shaping blocks of snow for shelter walls. Bone needles carved from caribou and seal ribs, stitched clothing with precision so fine that not a thread of cold could find a way in. Driftwood, precious as gold in the Arctic, was bent and shaped into sled runners, capable of gliding across frozen oceans. Sinew became threads stronger, more flexible, and more durable than many modern materials. Even snow transformed into structure, its grain, texture, and density carefully chosen, according to purpose, whether for insulation, weight, or load-bearing strength. Nothing was wasted. Everything held meaning. Every material had a destiny, guided by knowledge passed quietly, from one generation to the next. But tools alone never guaranteed survival. They were only as powerful as the courage of the hands that used them. And no test of courage demanded more skill, patience, or nerve than the ancient hunt. The hunt that decided whether a family would starve or feast. Seal hunting was the heartbeat of Inuit survival. To hunt a seal on the frozen sea, you first had to understand the world the animal lived in. A world beneath the ice, quiet, rhythmic, and ruled by breath. Seals rise through small air holes in the ice, returning to them again and again. But the hunter must wait for them, sometimes for hours, motionless in temperatures that numb exposed skin. Within seconds, he approaches silently, feeling for faint vibrations beneath the snow, reading the wind so his scent won't drift toward the hole. Then he kneels, spear poised, listening not for sound, but for the absence of it. Long silence, long cold, nothing but breath. Then, a faint exhale, a whisper of air rising from the dark. In a single fluid motion, the harpoon strikes. The line snaps tight. A struggle unfolds beneath the ice. Unseen, but unmistakable. This was never sport. This was life. Seal meat fed families. Seal fat fueled the lamps that kept homes warm. Seal skins became boots, ropes, and waterproof clothing that stood between people, and a cold capable of killing in minutes. And danger was never far away. Thin ice could shatter without warning. A storm could erase the horizon into white oblivion. A polar bear could emerge silently from behind, its footsteps muffled by snow. What waited beyond the next crack in the ice was never certain. And so, for generations, Inuit hunters moved with the knowledge that the Arctic is always watching, always judging, rewarding only those who understood its rules. Travel defined Inuit identity. Across a landscape vast and unforgiving, hunters crossed enormous distances using dog sleds that skimmed over wind-packed snow, kayaks that sliced cleanly through icy waters, and umiaks large, open boats capable of carrying families, or pursuing whales across frigid seas. But the true genius of Inuit travel was never the tools themselves. It was the navigation. With no compass, no written maps, and storms that could erase every trace of the familiar, Inuit navigators moved through the Arctic, guided by memory, instinct, and a sensory awareness so refined that outsiders often mistook it for something supernatural. They read snowdrift patterns, sculpted by prevailing winds. They felt the thickness of ice, through subtle changes in vibration beneath their feet. They recognized distant hills, by the curve of their silhouettes in moonlight. And when the stars emerged rare, brilliant, and sharp against the black sky, they became pathways across a landscape, where one wrong decision could be fatal. The dogs that ran beside them were not pets. They were partners in survival. They sensed danger long before humans. Where ice thinned, where storms gathered strength, where seals rested close beneath the surface. To travel with dogs across frozen oceans required trust, respect, and a courage forged through generations. But one journey tested that courage more than any other. The journey home after a successful hunt. Families waited inside qarmaq houses, their stone lamps glowing softly, hoping the storm outside would not shift, not rise, not decide to close the path back. For in the Arctic, the way home was never guaranteed. It was earned, one careful mile at a time. For thousands of years, Inuit thrived in a world that seemed impossible for human life. Their resilience was never about toughness alone. It was about knowledge, the deep kind that lives in the bones and the breath, knowing the exact moment ice begins to groan, before it breaks, sensing when the wind shifts, and a blizzard is building behind the horizon, recognizing the sound of a seal rising to breathe through a snow-covered hole, understanding when the roof of a qarmaq needs reinforcing, before the storm has even touched the coastline. Today, many Inuit still hunt. They still teach children the ancient ways. They still speak the languages of their ancestors, and honor the land that shaped every story, every skill, every heartbeat of their culture. But the Arctic is changing. Ice forms later, melts sooner, and cracks in ways no elder has seen before. Migration routes shift. Animals appear at different times, in different places. Old knowledge meets new realities, and the balance between past and future grows more fragile each year. And yet, the heart of Inuit resilience remains untouched. The same ingenuity that shaped bone tools, built qarmaq homes, and carried families through endless winters, still guides communities today, as they face challenges more complex than any storm. What kept the Inuit alive was never the desire to dominate the Arctic. It was the humility to listen to it, to understand that survival is a conversation, not a conquest. And the question that opened our journey, whether a modern human could survive a single night in this world, finds its answer here. You would survive only if you learned what the Inuit always knew, that the Arctic is not an enemy to defeat, but a teacher, demanding attention, respect, and awe. If stories like this make you rethink what human resilience truly means, then stay with us. Because here on Native Legends Uncovered, we journey into the worlds of cultures who didn't just survive nature's hardest lessons, they mastered them. Their wisdom still echoes across the land, across the ice, and across the generations that followed. These are truths shaped by wind and stone, carried through long winters, and preserved by people who understood. That strength is not loud. It is patient, observant, and rooted in respect. So join us for the next journey. There is still so much left to uncover, so much the ancestors are still willing to teach, to those who choose to listen. Stay close. The story continues.